Hey everybody, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today I'm going to give you a review of one of my favorite frugal dungeons, the Mad Manor of Astabar, and I'll give you some tips on how to run it great. Let me take a moment to explain what I mean when I say a frugal dungeon. In my game mastering career, I've GM'd a lot of dungeons. I started out with the classics like Keep on the Borderlands and Palace of the Silver Princess. Hey, what was the one with the Lich? You know, the one that killed everybody?
You're thinking of Tomb of Horrors.
Nah, wasn't it? It was something else like... Anyway. Last year, I ran my players through Dungeon of the Mad Mage. All of those dungeons are big, sprawling, and can last many, many sessions. None of those dungeons are what I would call a frugal dungeon. To me, a frugal dungeon is one that can easily be run in one session, takes an hour or less to prepare, and just costs a few bucks. The best frugal dungeons can easily be adapted into any campaign. I think they're great for new players, but also for game masters who've had a busy week at work and don't have a lot of time to prepare something longer for their players. But it's surprisingly hard to find great adventures like this. Because they're short and sweet, they're mostly the domain of indie writers. And there's a ton of indie content out on the internet, and the quality ranges all over the place. So when I find a frugal dungeon that I think is great, I carefully store it away in a dungeon of my own. The Mad Manor of Astabar is a gem of a frugal dungeon. Now, before I dig in, I just want to warn you that there's spoilers ahead, so get out of here, you sneaky players. The Mad Manor of Astabar is a low-level dungeon written by David Dudka and is designed for any fantasy game. It's mostly written for Dungeons & Dragons, but you can easily adapt it to other systems. The manor itself is fairly timeless. I've run this adventure twice. The first time I ran it in an Arabian Nights-like setting. The second time I set it in a pirate's 18th century swashbuckling game. It just doesn't take a lot of work to port it to any setting of your choice. The setup for the adventure is this. An old hermit named Astabar discovers an ancient wand. He tries to deconstruct it, and of course this goes horribly wrong. He ends up getting hurled into another dimension and starves to death. His manor's left abandoned. The PCs hear about this story from a young bard who's eager to discover the secrets of this manor. So you can see right away how flexible the start of this adventure is. The manor could be anywhere, and the wand could be anything. I'm actually tempted to replace the bard with a young journalist, and the wand with a strange machine, and set it in Arkham, Massachusetts, and run it as a Call of Cthulhu game. I might actually do that. Now the adventure does start with something a little weird. Really, it's my only big complaint. As the PCs approach the manor for the first time, they discover that it's guarded by a rhinoceros. Wait, did we write that down right? Like a rhinoceros?
No, I double checked.
Like a rhino?
It's definitely a rhino.
You sure it wasn't like a tyrannosaurus? Like maybe it's just...
It says right here, it's a rhino.
All right, I'll go with it. This rhinoceros is going to keep the PCs inside the manor until they discover its secrets and escape. Okay, so I get how there was a wand of wonder and it malfunctioned and created, I don't know, a rhino to guard the place, but this all feels pretty random to me. When I ran the adventure, I changed this part. When I set it in the Arabian Nights, I had the entire manor surrounded by hostile apes and vicious monkeys once the PCs entered. It was like nature itself abhorred the place. When I set it in a pirate setting, I actually just had the manor seal itself up when the players entered, so they couldn't escape until they figured out the puzzles inside. But unless you're really into rhinos, I'd recommend just tweaking this first part.
Oh, because monkeys are so much better than rhinos.
What are you talking about? Monkeys are vicious. The manor itself is 3 levels and about 20 rooms. There's not a lot of combat in this adventure, just some small annoyances here and there, but I'll get to that in a second. The main set piece of this adventure, though, is Astabar's dining room, where the PCs discover the remains of a horrific dinner party, where the guests are all skeletal, and they're missing their heads. That's right, 8 skeletons at the table and 8 skulls to find. The PCs will quickly find one of the skulls and discover that it's got these strange runes carved into it, symbols of the moon. The rest of the adventure requires the PCs to scour the house, find the 8 skulls, and return them to the correct guest. This, in turn, opens up a secret room where the PCs will discover the fate of Astabar. This is such a simple and great premise. With 8 skulls to find in about 20 rooms, players are going to be finding skulls quite often. Makes the adventure feel like it's moving fast. Also, the author did a great job hiding the skulls in fun places, and none of them are too hard to find, so I really doubt your players are going to ever get stuck missing a skull. And the best part for game masters is that the adventure puts a giant skull picture under each entry of each room when there's one there, so that as a game master you don't forget to give your players a skull once they visited a room. I do that all the time.
Oh, you want to search the drawers? There's nothing in them. They're all empty. Yeah, there's nothing in them.
30 minutes later.
Oh, you remember those drawers you searched? Yeah, there was a skull in there. I totally forgot to tell you. The skull was in the drawer. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was there.
Now I've made 2 tweaks to this central part of the adventure. First, there's not really a great explanation for what went down at this dinner party. So if your players like a strong narrative, you're going to have to do some invention to explain this to them. What I did was I created a handout, an invitation that they could find in Astabar's library. He had planned to invite all of his friends over and show off what he had done with his strange new wand. Of course, it all went wrong and the guest's flesh melted away. And then, because the adventure referenced that Astabar had an imp that he had as a familiar, I had the imp pop up and brag how after the guests had died, he pulled off their skulls and hid them around the house to be mischievous and playful. That's sort of what imps do, right? The second change I made was to the dinner puzzle itself. The dinner table puzzle requires the players to find the skulls and put them back in a certain order, associated with the phases of the moon and the runes carved into the skulls. Now, my players just weren't great at solving visual puzzles, so they found this deciphering the runes really hard. Plus, there's a lightning blast that zaps players whenever they get it wrong. So the second time I ran this, I just removed the moon phase puzzle altogether. If I were to run this adventure again, I might actually go create a backstory for each of those guests, and then make the players figure out which skull goes onto which guest based on that backstory. It might lengthen the adventure a little bit, but it would add some more story. I think that'd be a fun change. Like I mentioned before, there's not a lot of combat in this adventure. The most interesting foe is a doppelganger who hangs out in the pantry. And of course, doppelgangers are great ways to mess with your players, especially if they're splitting up while exploring the house. I had this great moment with one of my players. He was new to role-playing, and he opened up the pantry door and found himself staring at himself, and it really freaked him out. It was such a great moment, and he still talks about it to this day.
Hey guys, I'm gonna get a snack in the pantry. Never mind.
But other than the doppelganger, most of the other enemies are just vermin or critters still living in the house. There's a giant centipede under the bed, there's some rats in the kitchen, a giant toad in the bath, things like that. They can easily be avoided or dispatched without a lot of threat or danger. I don't think this is a bad thing, but if your players really expect tough fights, you may want to swap out some of those creatures for things that are less generic. For example, when I ran this in the Arabian Nights setting, I actually included a strange pastel tiger. He'd escaped from the ethereal plane when Astabar's experiment went wrong, and he was now stalking the house, looking for stragglers. His presence alone made the mansion feel more dangerous and less abandoned. There's a lot of wonder in the house that I really like. There's a weird room where gems constantly fall from the ceiling. Another room is filled with strange butterflies, and the players will discover devices all throughout the house that they'll no doubt want to fiddle with. There's not a lot of traps in the adventure. The ones that exist aren't too deadly, but they give something for the rogue players to go do. The one exception is when the PCs finally find Astabar's wand. Anyone approaching the wand is hurled into the ethereal plane where they're attacked by Astabar's hungry ghost who wants to eat them. Now, this is likely to be a death trap for the first poor player who walks up to the wand and tries to take it. So when I ran this part, I made it so when the PCs find the wand, they see that it's obviously sparking and malfunctioning. It's surrounded by a field, like an old projector where they see flickers of the ethereal plane and what's happening in it. So now the PCs had to figure out how to rush forward and grab the wand before the field flickered up again. And of course I made this a hard dexterity roll so that inevitably one of the PCs would be sucked into the ethereal plane. But at least with this method, the players knew that there was danger walking up to the wand. And then also when one of their friends got sucked in, they could see what was happening and they had to make a hard choice whether to rush in and save their friend, wondering if they could ever get back out, or go destroy the wand and hope that that fixed the situation. I thought this tweak just added more tension and agency in this last encounter. Finally, there's a lightweight twist at the end of the adventure where the players discover that the bard, the one from the beginning who told them about the manor to begin with, she died inside the manor. They discover her corpse in the attic. And this kind of leads to that classic ghost story moment payoff where the players wonder, were they talking to a ghost the whole time? Now, the character of the bard isn't really fleshed out. I just used her to set up the adventure and then again to have that creepy little payoff at the end. But game masters can easily take her and make her a bigger part of the story, have her accompany the PCs or know more about the history of the manor. You could go in that direction if you want. So to sum up, the Mad Manor of Astabar is one of my favorite frugal dungeons. It's a breeze to prepare, plays in one session, easily fits into any campaign, can easily be morphed into what you want, and I think it's got a nice combination of exploration and puzzle solving. You can grab it on DriveThruRPG and it's pay what you want, so you can't beat that. The author, David Dudka, just did a great job with this one, and I think I want to check out some of his other adventures. Oh, and if you're interested in the virtual tabletop assets that I created for this adventure, including that invitation to Astabar's crazy dinner party, I've posted a link to them in the description below. Well, I hope this video was helpful for anyone looking to insert a short dungeon into their campaign or maybe introduce new role players to the game. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button, and I'll see you soon. Oh, and if you have a favorite frugal dungeon, please let me know in the comments below because I'd love to discover some more. And one last thing, watch out for that rhinoceros. He is random, but he's got a bad temper. Hey, can you, do we mistype that? It can't be right. Like a rhinoceros, like a rhino, like a rhino, like a, hi.